Hi, my name is Calandra Anderson. I am 15 and I am with Lens Youth Initiative. I'm here today to talk to you about how air quality is not how it should be. I am not the best knowledgeable person, and honestly I've been ignorant for way too long, but I live in a neighborhood where I-205 and constant pollution, and where companies are allowed to release pollution in the air that we don't even know about. I've lived in the Lentz neighborhood for all of my life, all 14 years, except for 1 year where I wasn't born here, and I have faced vigorous and multiple health issues because of just the place I live alone. It should not be regulated by numbers. It should be regulated by the people. The number system does not work for anybody. You may be able to calculate how much somebody can afford or how much people's lungs can take, but it's not about that. It's about how poor the air quality is and how it affects people and their health issues. I have asthma, and on days like this, I can only be outside for 4 hours at a time, and it's so sad that the 4 hours I can be out, I have to be here fighting for my right to breathe. I walk outside and I'm unable to even be out there longer than a day. I can't exercise like I'm supposed to. Going to school is a hassle, especially when the same place I live is the same neighborhood I go to school, so there's no release from the constant pollution and constant exposure to these toxins that my body just can't take. So that's why I'm here today. I'm here to fight for my human rights that are being stripped away from me, that I'm not allowed to have since I was born. Unfortunately, I cannot speak about how it used to be 20, 25 years ago. I'm here now, and I know for a fact that my constant exposure to this pollution is affecting my life in ways I can't control, and it hurts not to be able to walk outside and enjoy that time. It hurts me deeply because I can't control it. And the fact of the matter is, your rules should be able to help youth like me live their lives. It's to a point where I can't do certain things, and I understand there's a time limit on how much I'm supposed to say, but there's no time limit on how I'm being affected. There's no time limit on how far my lungs can take, because by the time this is over or rules can change, I might not be here anymore, and that's the problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before I leave, I want to hand you over 1,000 petition signatures that people all over my neighborhood and around us have been given.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Greg Suki, long-term health. How is this affecting the elderly? How is this affecting children? How is this affecting people with respiratory illnesses? The governor promised Oregonians that people's health would be prioritized. Instead, what we have seen in this process is that this process has caved to corporate and industry pressure. There are no limits to the maximum emissions beyond what a facility can no longer pollute, and that puts the public health at risk. Instead, you are considering that DEQ directors have the final authority to decide if a facility can continue to pollute beyond the permitted limit. This is too much power to give one individual. This would be the lobbyist's dream to only have one person to persuade. One person who is not required to have any expertise on matters of public health. In order for many people, it's actually very clear to people here in this room that profits have been prioritized over public health. We have seen this process bend over backwards to accommodate industry. We want you to fulfill the promise that our governor pledged, to make sure that people's health is prioritized. We want a process that does not submit to the threats that these regulations will kill jobs, since they have not taken into account the cost of public health in our communities. We want you to do this, to do your jobs, because this is what you were tasked to do, to provide rules to hold those accountable for the pollution that is poisoning our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Orlando. So Alex Mihalo. Alex? Julie Reardon is up next.
My name is Alex Mijares. Before I begin my testimony, I'd like to remind everyone here that we are on stolen land from the indigenous Kalapuya tribe. I'm really disturbed and confused to what's going on here. This discussion and process absolutely blows me away. We're talking about toxins in the air, toxins, meaning venom or poison that causes disease. To any sane person, the reasoning behind this debate is absolutely ludicrous. I don't want to live in a world where the people in power try to normalize the toleration of any amount of disease-causing poisons in the air. Children are getting sick and dying. Does that not mean anything to you people? Or is it profits all that you want to see? You say, oh, the jobs, we got to protect the jobs, which is a logical response, but it's a logical response wrapped around the perspective that it's okay to continue an industrial world that destroys our environment. This belief and perspective binds us to debate back and forth instead of liberating ourselves to think outside the box. You know what I see going on here? I see a dialectic strategy to distract our imaginative thinking by getting us to focus on how to combat your statements on jobs. We have the ability and resources to transition our entire way of doing things. It's time to accelerate our technology and innovate the industry with eco-friendly tactics and no more pollution of any kind. This may seem like a radical idea to you folks, and if that's so, then I encourage you to change your beliefs in how the system works. We have the intelligence and capacity to think up solutions. Oh, but you rather continue the pollution and perpetuate toxic wastelands where only the poor are impacted. Your lack of compassion and toleration of pollution is narcissistic. What you are allowing is genocide. Who are you trying to fool and why? Why are you giving us these weak standards? Why does the DEQ director have the final authority to decide if a facility can continue to pollute beyond the permitted limit? How can we trust him alone to make the best decisions with the directly impacted in mind? Why can't final authority be shared amongst the director of OHA, DEQ, and the community? Why is the DEQ proposed treating a new facility differently than existing facilities? Because it's difficult to retrofit, you say? Show us the evidence on that. We need stricter regulations for our state. We need meaningful participation and community engagement for all decisions being made. Low-income and communities of color face disproportionate impacts of air pollution, and environmental justice framework is necessary to address these injustices. Again, the argument over jobs versus regulations is a false and harmful choice that forces community to choose between their job and protecting health of their families. This argument persists because industry places profits over people.
Thank you.
I need to sit. Hello, my name is Julie and I live in the Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood in South Portland. My closest neighborhood polluters are Precision Cast Parts Large Parts Facility, McClure Industries, Eastside Plating, AGC Heat Transfer, Technical Finishes and Coatings, Wright Manufacturing, Artistic Cleaners, a U-Haul Repair Center which does special coating, the boiler at Reed College, Hogan Fab, Advanced Powder Coating, Johnson Concrete Products, PCC Structural Small Parts Facility, and Simmons International. That's about a 1-mile radius from my home. Nothing in the draft rules addresses when we are living near several facilities that pollute below their thresholds individually, but collectively their emissions are well over the threshold and pose a serious risk to public health. At the last CAO meeting, industry tried to equate employment to protecting health. Well, my husband does have a job, and last year my family got locked into the cheapest employee-sponsored health insurance plan available before getting our subsidy dropped by OHA because even though we were still poor enough to qualify, our plan was not cost-effective for them. Our youngest child requires regular specialist visits, and what should have taken 30 days for OHP to cover our kids took 8 months. They fell through every crack possible, and the specialist bills almost went into collections. We were forced to pay for gas and food on a credit card so we could pay for our health insurance because social services do not consider your cost of insurance when applying for food stamps. Now my husband and I are uncovered and struggling to pay back the thousands of dollars in debt we accrued last year just from feeding our family and the gas to get him to his non-union, low-wage labor job with a multi-million-dollar employer. We've both been sick for the last 2 years, and it got to a point where we had to sit down and decide which of us would see a doctor, even if it meant further debt. We decided that he would have to go because he was the one with the paycheck and he needed to be well enough to work. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to have that conversation with your partner? You probably don't. You were given a task to write new rules to protect public health, and you are failing. Your first failure was giving industry lobbyists a seat at the table. This past legislative session proves that industry dollars boast more power than community voices.
bills to protect public health, transparency, accountability of industry, and funding for this whole program were destroyed because of AOI, and yet they sit here as stakeholders, and we're all supposed to pretend like there's no conflict of interest. They are the self-destruct button within the Cleaner Air Oregon process. In the smallest fragment of time, humans have raped Earth's every available resource with no regard for consequence. We blow up mountains, extract titanium, and then pump PCBs into Johnson Creek, poisoning salmon and the food source for indigenous people. You continue to ignore the autism cluster of blue-collar families wedged between PCC and McClure, regardless of the studies that prove exposure to styrene and hexachromium in utero increases autism risk by 65%. We spent decades stuffing furnaces with trivalent chromium and fill the air with hexachromium that ravage bodies with cancer. We soak railroad ties in more than 24 carcinogens and let thousands of them sit in the hot sun, while people in the Dalles downwind can't let their kids play in their yards without developing boils on their bodies and nosebleeds. These draft rules do not go far enough to safeguard the health of the environmental justice communities risking their lives by doing no more than living in a neighborhood they can barely afford. There is a lot of damage that industry and regulators need to make up for. For the past 18 months, I've stood in front of you in these spaces, I've yelled at you, I've cried at you, and I've asked you so many times to recognize your own humanity, to be brave, and to stand up to the status quo. You've had so much support behind you, people that volunteered their personal resources, legislators, and even the governor, and you still couldn't do it. It doesn't take a person with letters after their name to read between the lines and see how industry exploits lives for profits and uses jobs as their scapegoat. Whether people of industry like it or not, their field has perpetuated the destruction of this planet, our livability, public health, and the cowardice of our regulators has given them permission to do so.
Thank you. So Marisol Cabello. Marisol? And then next up is Vicky. I just have Vicky S.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Marisol.
Am I speaking? Okay. I'm going to put this in the center just because, yeah, that's something you should read, definitely. And also, who do I give to?
Yeah, over here in the tip.
Okay.
Thank you.
I am not tall enough.
You can just bring that down.
There you go. So also, by the way, I just found out this morning from Julie's testimony about the string of autism, and I'm on the spectrum, and my parents were living there before I was born. So I wouldn't be surprised if I'm one of those babies. Okay. My name is Marisol, and I'm a youth organizer from Woodburn, Oregon. My family has lost valuable lives because of the toxins they have been exposed to. After being exposed to factory pollutants and pesticides, they developed cancer. My Aunt Rosie died before I could even meet her, in her 30s. My Aunt Vanjie lived a little longer. She died in her 60s, which is still young to die. Just last week, my grandma lost her